It's a pleasure to be here. I want to talk to you about a project that we worked on in Chengdu, in China here. I feel that it's actually very topical. It follows on from the two previous speakers, which were both very excellent. And it addresses a lot of the issues that we're facing in the world today. Let's figure this out. Okay. I think we've seen this slide pretty much several times, many times over the period of this conference, but we can't reiterate it enough. The global population is increasing and it's moving to urban areas. This has a number of impacts. When people move from the countryside to cities, obviously there's several things that happen. One is that the cities obviously spread and get bigger, and the other thing is we lose things such as agriculture, such as rural skills. Communities start moving and drifting. I think one thing that is important is actually to consider the fact that cities traditionally would be built in areas where the resources to support those cities are close by. And that might be agriculture. So as a city expands, it actually expands into the area that would once have actually fed that city. And that's quite an important thing to realize, that not only are we losing, it's about the loss of agricultural land. What I wanted to talk about, rather than the global issues, is actually the specific focus on China, because that's obviously where we are, where this presentation is, and where the project is. But it's the actual scale of things in China. It's really worth just mentioning a few things. Things such as if you look at this, sorry. If you look at the solid waste management, 190,000 tons. 190 million tons of waste is currently generated, and that's expected to be 480 million tons of waste by 2030. That's an incomprehensible amount. Imagine that going into landfill sites, how much space that's taking up, and the problems that are going to result from that. We're looking at simple things like traffic congestion. Well, it's obviously not a simple thing, it's a very complicated thing, but the actual, not only the inconvenience of people, but the cost to the economy of things such as that. There's so many issues to deal with here that China is a great case study. And what we could do is, in a way, we could summarize all of these issues with six themes. Land consumption and sprawl being a major issue, loss of farmland, energy security. We know that obviously fossil fuels are a finite resource, and obviously the CO2 emissions associated with it. Solid waste management, a big deal. Water shortages. Water is possibly it is already the next big thing, really. In many countries we've addressed how we reduce energy demands and what have you, but water management is a big deal. So what I want to talk to you about is this particular project. A developer. What's different about this project than some of the projects here? This was a developer-led project rather than a government-led project for a master plan, for a city master plan. The developer, he had this idea that he wanted to address the fact that cities are getting bigger and spreading out, and he felt that that's a really bad thing. But from a developer side, he could actually use that as an opportunity. So he could basically develop small cities of 100,000 people or thereabouts, close to the fringe of an existing city, and make money on it. That's basically what developers want to do. So his requirements were that we use 100 hectares built-up area, 1 square kilometre. We had a 200-hectare buffer zone around it. It would support 100,000 people in a live-work environment. We'd have the minimum possible environmental impact, and be economically viable. To be economically viable, obviously it has to have an economic driver, and his vision was that would be healthcare. Of course, it needed to be feasible. You can't build something like that all in one go, and the idea would be that you could actually repeat it elsewhere. So this would be a template for something that you could do, repeat throughout the country. Chengdu, for those of you who don't know it, it's in central China. This is the Himalayas. It's on about the same latitude as we are here. It's a greenfield site. The site that we had is 15 kilometers south of Chengdu, of the city center of Chengdu. Ordinarily, we wouldn't, you know, as a environmentally conscious architectural practice, we wouldn't really want to develop in greenfield sites. However, this is in the zoning, in the greater master plan for Chengdu region, this is zoned to be, was zoned to be mixed use industrial and residential. So it's going anyway. So we felt that, well, how about we try to do the very best job we can environmentally and develop it. Currently, it's, as you can see, it's agricultural land. And so we came up, we developed 8 principles that we wanted to use to guide us in the process to develop what we wanted to be a highly sustainable city. It had to be vertically integrated. It was obviously going to have to include some very tall buildings. It had to have an economic foundation. There's no such thing as sustainability if you don't include economics. It had to accommodate the fact that we have an aging population. We have this 1-2-4 issue in China, and so we would expect that the city would have to be able to be a nice place for young people, very, very young people, for young working couples and for elderly people. It had to be walkable, of course. That's what everybody wants. What we want, to reduce the carbon from transportation. And it had to be attractive, obviously. We wanted to include food production. One of the things, and I'll mention it a little bit later, was that yes, we are building it in a greenfield site, but how about when in doing that in the development of the city, we actually don't change the net agricultural productivity of the city, so we keep it the same. So if for example it produces 5,000 tons of biomass currently from the land, we want to maintain that level of production. It needed to be affordable, of course, and of course, 8, but probably the most important is that it needed to be a sustainable community with a low environmental impact. So what we did is we came up with 8 themes, which we actually took from the BREEAM communities, or we adapted from BREEAM communities in one of the UK green building rating systems. And within these themes, we developed a bunch of goals. You probably can't read this, but this includes things such as managing all the rainwater on site. What else would we say? Obviously, reducing energy demand. We have things on the side here where we have sustainable business charters. So it does embrace economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Within each of, sorry, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but within each of these goals, what we developed is a series of key performance indicators that we were able to model in developing the city, and I can show you that a little bit later. But things like energy demand, it would be trying to reduce energy consumption to, say, something around about, I think it was 120 kilowatt hours per square meter per year or something like that. This is a bird's eye view of what we eventually came up with, but what I want to talk to you about is the process by how we got there. So the key statistics about the city, it's the project area ended up being 3.6 square kilometers. You can read this for yourself. I'm not going to go through it in every single thing, but I think some of the key things I'm just going to pull out has 55,000 adults of working age. That was what the client envisaged, and we had. I should actually say that we worked with economic consultants, healthcare consultants, infrastructure consultants, financial planners, and what have you, to make sure all these figures are validated. In fact, many of these figures were coming from them anyway. And the healthcare consultant essentially told us that we would actually be able to create 51,000 jobs in the city. So we did have a really good opportunity for it to be a live-work environment. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few of the concepts that we developed. Obviously, vertical density is a big one. And the process by how we got to this was kind of interesting. When we first started on the project, we didn't actually have a site. The client had this idea, he brought us on, and so we took 6 million square meters. That was, I should have said that was the GFA requirement. We took 6 million square meters and started messing around with it to see how it might look. all the same height, obviously tall at the back, smaller at the front. And this was actually a meeting in the client's office where we were just kind of walking him through the process by how you might start to develop a city around that. And this shows you an example of some of this, you know, how we like to work with the client, working with them to put ideas, connect stuff and what have you. And then during this meeting on the second day, the client actually said, well, that's very nice, but we do have a site now, and I'm afraid a square thing isn't going to work. You're going to have to think of something else. And this was the site he gave us here, and this is the site in Shanglu County. This is a freight rail, this is a main road, and our site is this. So one of the things we wanted to do is just firstly look at the topography, and what was really great is that we were actually able to do this in front of the client using GIS. He was able to actually provide us with some survey data and a satellite image, which is all we needed. So we took this, we did a digital elevation model, and right away you can see that we have some beautiful topography here. We have a ridge running east-west, so this is a map-oriented north-south, and we have a ridge running north-south. So we had natural valleys here, which we thought straight away we can use for managing rainwater. And from that, we were able to develop this. We took the site, made it a little bit more simple to visualize by drawing along a series of contour lines. And we just through simple mathematics, we were able to develop a circular form of 1 square kilometer. We've already heard from the previous presenter how we have experience in rationalizing street layouts and parcelization to basically make it walkable, make it accessible, give it a clear center of focus, but also all of these parcels are things that a developer would be interested in developing, that they're a manageable size. This is the road layout, and this was basically how we developed the mixed use theme. We knew that the city needed to have a clear center, a district center, a center of focus where you'd have taller buildings. But at the same time, we didn't want simply like a central business district in the middle and then residential outside. That was not what we wanted. So we had district centers in each of these 4 districts here. And this diagram here shows you the mixture of building heights. So 240 to 300 in the center. These district centers here around about 180 to 240, then with low rise around these edges and the valleys that I showed you before. And this is how it ultimately looked. We have a system where everybody has, one of the key performance indicators was that people would have access to green space. Every single person, well, every building, should I say, had access within 200 meters of green space, which is excellent for 100,000 people. This shows you how this jelly diagram shows you again how the mixed use, the live-work environment worked. This is the medical district in the top here. I mentioned before about vertical farming. We did embrace vertical farming. I think there's a lot of, for want of a better word, like wackiness about vertical farming. These buildings were specifically designed for farming. They're not office buildings that you're growing plants in. These are actually very lightweight structures which would be used for vertical farming. We had manufacturing. We have schools down here, and all the time, all this. The lighter yellow color is basically affordable, not affordable in the sense of the European use of the word affordable housing, but I mean housing that is affordable to people who are employed. And then in the center here, the darker yellow is more high-end residential. Quality of life, a clearly important thing. I mentioned to you about the 200 meters to a green space thing, but it's not just green space. We had other cultural facilities in the center, in the district centers. Each of them would have one feature that would basically draw people to it. And again, we talk about how we laying out residential areas, so high density residential here, and lower density around the edges. Here's a rendering of how the district centres might look. One thing that I did want to say, we don't show it very much in the renderings, but the buildings are connected at ground level and at various levels, so that there's lots of walkable planes. It's not just a single ground plane, there's multiple ground planes. This is, everybody would have access to recreational areas and healthcare. And talking about healthcare, obviously we talk about the economies that might drive the city. Healthcare being the key one, but that in itself then spawns a bunch of other potential opportunities for economic development. The vertical farming I talked about, this wouldn't necessarily be lettuces. I don't think an entire city is going to be fed on lettuce, but it could well be things like medicinal crops that could be used to support research and development around the healthcare. It could be a number of high-value things. Internet technology, the client is very interested in that as a money-making venture. Typical office stuff, research and development, light manufacturing. And all of those things would, like I said, would create an estimated 51,000 jobs, of which not everybody in the city is obviously going to work in there. We'd have some toing and froing. Some people would have to come to work in the city, and some people would have to leave the city to go to work. So transportation is a big deal. So how did we manage that? Well, coming into the city, we have these major roads with a potential service road underneath. We thought about how we would manage traffic, and there's a couple of things, especially for delivery vehicles, that they're what really can slow traffic down, parking on the side of the road and what have you. And so you can either build a service tunnel underneath, but what we did with the traffic consultants, which is Mott MacDonald, we just modeled various scenarios where heavy goods vehicles are not allowed inside the city limits after certain times. So you just enforce the deliveries to happen at off-peak times. There's lots of solutions for taking vehicles off the road that don't necessarily penalise people. We didn't want to penalise car drivers, we just wanted to encourage people to use alternative sources. So one thing that we thought is that people would drive into the city. I'm going to show you another image here. People could drive into the city and we'd have multimodal hubs here, so you could drive in or use the metro. Sorry, I should have pointed out this. In fact, I do point out in another slide that there's a metro. People could come in and bike rental schemes like you have in London, Paris, Chicago, all over the world. And then they could cycle, or they could walk, they could catch a bus that just takes you around. There's so many options, you don't have to drive into the city. And so even Zipcar, we spoke with Zipcar, and interestingly enough, I don't know if those of you who know car share schemes, but cities such as Chengdu exactly match their economic model for where you would want to do that kind of thing. The connectivity with transit, I did mention. This is Chengdu City. There's a high-speed rail that links Chengdu to other cities, and then there's a metro rail that would come actually straight through the center of our city and head south, and there's a second line potentially planned that would loop in like this. So it had great connectivity. Sustainable infrastructure. I think now this is where we get into the hardcore sustainability, and this is where where we spent a lot of the focus of the city. In fact, I should just go really highlight some of these things. It was. I think that when you're developing a city, you have to. We overuse the word integration, but one time when you really should use it is in urban planning. You can't develop buildings without considering the bilateral relationship with the infrastructure that supports them. The cost of infrastructure is very high, so an efficient building uses less infrastructure. Better infrastructure can reduce your energy demand through load sharing, interseasonal heat storage. There's so many things that we can look at. When we designed the city, we did a lot of environmental modeling, and we actually had to develop tools that allowed us to model at an entire city scale. Clearly, there's a lot of potential for overshadowing. So what the software, what our parametric modeling allowed us to do is to basically, when one building clearly was going to have an effect on its neighbor, it kind of generated itself. The building would then move or rotate to reduce that. And so we were able to totally optimize daylighting, which is obviously an important thing in any city. And it's a code requirement, of course. You know, we had a lot of strategies to reduce energy demand. I think that I don't need to go through all of them, but ultimately through just smart passive design and using high-performing materials. But when I say high-performing materials, I'm not talking about new emerging technologies and what have you. I'm just talking about integrating existing technologies that are out there to deliver a 30% energy saving. So this horrible image represents the infrastructure system and how it's integrated. It really looked much better on my computer than this. But anyway, this kind of web, which I'm going to skip away from, that basically showed how we integrated things, and it's absolutely critical. If I can just walk through an example. So you would have, say, the buildings, they're producing wastewater. That wastewater would be treated in what we developed as an eco park, which is located here, located on the north of the city. And that eco park contained solid waste management facility, combined heat and power plant, wastewater treatment, and that allowed all the synergies to develop and to maximize the opportunities for saving energy and saving cost. So back to the wastewater example, a building produces wastewater, that goes to the eco park where there's a wastewater treatment plant. Obviously we'd have an anaerobic digester to produce biogas. Biogas would go into the combined heat and power plant. The CO2 from that would not, we could just discharge it into the air, but alternatively we could enrich the atmosphere in the vertical farming because they're custom built. That you can do that kind of technology. The tertiary treatment of the water could happen in these valleys. That could provide recreation. It could provide fish farms. The valleys themselves I'm sure you've heard of reed bed filtration systems that are commonly used in the rest of the world. We can use like a similar system, but using bamboo here. Bamboo produces biomass. Biomass goes into the waste to energy plant, generates heat and power. So you know, it's very easy to see how you can link all of these kind of things, and especially when you have the advantage of developing something absolutely afresh. Ron McDonald had a great system which has been used in Europe called underground thermal energy storage or interseasonal heat storage, which basically you cool the ground. You have two parts of the ground. Some parts you try to cool, so you can use that in summer, and in summer you reject the heat into a second part and you use that heat in winter. It's simply like a large geothermal heat rejection system. But it's very, very effective and has no impact on the environment. And of course, what it does, it really reduces the need for peak energy production, which is usually the dirtiest power. Well, I've talked about the eco park already. So we had a vacuum waste collection system. I think that's very common in new cities. It's so efficient, takes garbage trucks off the road, encourages source segregation. Is that like, it's over, that bell? All right, we've got 5 minutes or something. The natural systems. Yes, very, very important. Like I said, we wanted to retain the agriculture, so we kept as much agriculture here as possible. It ended up being a little bit more programmed, but was supported by more groundwater in the valleys. So it was supported by having a greater volume of water because it's come from the city. We have productive areas, and we have functional landscape where it would be more creative for people to have recreation. And of course, all these things are serving multiple purposes. I think that's the key when you're developing something like this, is that every single thing that you do should have more than one function. I think that's really important. And that was definitely the case here. Like I said, the stormwater storage, the stormwater and stormwater management areas would also serve as a tertiary treatment for wastewater. They'd produce biomass. There'd be recreation areas. You could farm fish. So many things you can do. This limpang concept is basically one of the things we wanted to do to enhance the look and feel of the city, where we actually bring the natural landscape into the city and up the buildings. You see that a lot. I'm not sure how successful it is in very tall towers, but on lower buildings like this, it really improves the environment. It improves microclimate. People, when they're connected with the landscape, are better. There's so many studies that show things such as patients in hospitals have a faster recovery rate when they can see landscape out of the window. People, even in offices, are more productive when they can see green out of their windows. So it's a tried and tested concept. It's not a gimmick. Just bringing green into the building doesn't cost anything, and it really improves the environment. And this shows how we envisage possibly one of the city ends, so to speak, of the valleys looking. You want to, obviously, this water edge, you want to engage with the public and the water. Agriculture, yeah, we talked about that. The client had some very specific requirements for how he thought that the agriculture should be done. And he wanted certain areas for certain types of crops, so we worked with a local landscape architect who was really awesome, and we developed that. It kind of looks a little bit strange here, but it was a really nice system, and they developed a series of cycle paths, of jogging paths that people could use, and I think one important thing is one important thing is that people do like to have gardens. People, live in super tall buildings. One of the big complaints is that they don't have access to their own garden and what have you. And so the client worked with us to develop a system where people would have like allotments, like they had, I think they call it city farms, perhaps that's the right word, where people would actually rent a little plot of land. And in the evening or at the weekend, they could come and grow crops and then go back, just literally walk back to their building. Absolutely beautiful. Innovative architecture. Yep. Obviously, what we wanted to do was to create a new typology for buildings. It wasn't just a case of taking existing buildings out there and putting them in. They would have to be different to meet the demands for speed of construction, feasibility, and what have you. So we looked at very modular systems, and the phrase "a kit of parts." Again, it's a very overused phrase, but this would be a time where that's an appropriate phrase. We have lots of, at least in the master plan, the building typologies. There were only a certain number of types, and there has to be. Otherwise, you end up having one building that actually has an impact. When you have a dense city, you would have buildings that have an impact on each other, and we went to great lengths to try to reduce that through the modeling exercise. So this shows you a valley edge. This is the very edge of the city. We did want to give it a clear boundary. It didn't want to be a walled city, but at the same time, we didn't want to actually create what we're trying to solve. We didn't want to encourage urban sprawl in our own city. This land is very precious to us, so we felt that having a defined edge was very important, and it's very clear, a very strong edge around the city. And now I'm going to just quickly finish on talking about our strategy for how the city could be built. I'm sure everybody in this room has seen the Broad video where they assembled a 30-story building in 15 days. Some of you might be going to the hotel at the weekend. We didn't work with Broad on this, but clearly this is a system that people are considering, and so buildings that are very modular and easy to adapt as needs change. Perhaps this might want not halfway through construction, but these could be offices, and the modules could be not changed once they're in place, but you could imagine that you could just put an office module in instead of a residential module. And the other thing about that this kind of stuff is when people are moving out of the countryside, they don't have skills. And you can see how this would actually create a new skill set for the people in that area. They could work in an industry of building, prefabricating, and be literally moving from the countryside to being at the cutting edge of construction technology. It's incredible. Just want to focus on now this is the second to last slide. I want to focus on some of the achievements of the city that we modelled along with Mott MacDonald, and you can see it's very impressive. This is what we call the Shanghai vertical city. That's the city, and this compares it with a traditional city. Clearly has a lot more green area. 55. You can just look at this. It's a 55% increase in green area. I think the interesting things are 64% reduction in potable water demand, and wherever you can use non-potable water for toilet flushing, obviously that's met on site, so it's a huge reduction. The waste to energy facility, that reduces waste going to landfill by 94%. That's massive. Think back to the 480 million tons, and if you can reduce that by 94%. City energy use, obviously it's a big focus, and that has the effect on overall CO2 reduction of 69%. And I'd just like to finish with this summary slide. So, back to the 6 original problems. Land loss, well, this 100,000 people is only a seventh of a normal area occupied by that would be required for 100,000 people. 48% energy, 64% less water, 69% less CO2, and 94% less waste. Thank you very much.